All right, so this is the cell diagram assignment. We're going to go over the correct answers. Number 1 is right here, and I was a little confused because in this diagram, this is a animal cell, and the vacuole and the lysosomes are sometimes hard to tell apart. So I wasn't sure whether this is a vacuole or lysosome, so I made either answer correct. This one over here is probably a lysosome, and this one is probably a vacuole. A lot of times what you'll find is the vacuole is not round, and the lysosome usually is round. In this case, they're both round. So I just assumed since it was black on the inside that it was waste, but I don't know. So I would count either answer. Number 2 is the cytoskeleton. And you need to use your notes on these. Your notes, not Google, because the questions on your homework tonight are meant to make you go through the notes. And if you're just Googling the answers, you're not going to go through the notes and see the other stuff. So if you look and you're wondering what that is, where it says cytoskeleton, which is the correct answer, thin sticks made of protein. So what you need to know is in the notes. What's the matter?
I can barely see it.
You have it. I'm saying the answers, so I guess you'll just have to, let me scroll it down here. I can't make it bigger, or can I? There, how about that? I'll make it a little bigger. All right, so the next one's cytoskeleton. 2 is cytoskeleton. 3, which is right here. I wasn't sure if 3 and 4 were pointing at the nuclear membrane or the nucleus. They both look like they're kind of pointing at the same place. So I only put a 3 and I counted either answer. 4 isn't even on your paper. I don't know if you noticed that. It goes from 3 to 5. 5 is pointing to the ball inside the nucleus, which is the nucleolus or the nucleolus, however it's pronounced. It depends on who you ask. And then 6 talks about all of it, so that would be the nucleus. I didn't put 7 or 8 on there. I didn't put 7 on there. I think 7 is actually centrioles, but the picture was bad. It didn't look like any other centriole picture I'd seen. 8 is some more cytoskeleton, so I didn't put it on there twice. 9 is the mitochondria. The mitochondria looks like it has a maze inside, and this is a animal cell, so it wouldn't have a chloroplast. So there's no, is this a chloroplast or a mitochondria? Because this particular kind of cell doesn't have one. You can tell it's an animal cell because it doesn't have those squarish, flattish sides, and it doesn't have a cell wall. So anyway, and you ought to be able to remember that you don't have a chloroplast because your body can't turn sunlight into energy. So you don't have one. So it makes sense that an animal cell wouldn't have a chloroplast. Okay, mitochondria turns food into energy. Number 10 is the Golgi apparatus. Your notes say that it's not wrapped around the nucleus because some people get the Golgi and the ER mixed up, but the ER would be around the nucleus and the Golgi would not. And I want to point out that when I was in 7th grade science, it was called a Golgi body. When I was in high school science, it was called a Golgi body. When I was in college science, it was called a Golgi body. Somewhere between when I graduated from college and now, they call it the Golgi apparatus. You can call it either one. It's still right. Just remember that Golgi apparatus and Golgi body are the same thing. So number 10 is the Golgi apparatus. Number 11 is the cell membrane. You notice it's pointing right to the edge. So in an animal cell, the cell membrane is the outermost boundary of the cell. 12, you notice it's pointing to these free-floating ribosomes, and it's also pointing to the ribosomes on the ER. If you're ever looking at a cell and you're like, is that a ribosome or is that a lysosome? Look at the ER and see what those things that are stuck to the ER are ribosomes. So look at the ER and figure out, okay, this looks like what's stuck to the ER, so it's got to be a ribosome. Number 14, where is it? Somebody said, I think it's actually pointing to a dot. Somebody said the dot looks like an arrow, so it looks like possibly cytoplasm, so I counted either one. I think it's actually pointing to a dot, which is another ribosome. Is that dot looks like a dot. It doesn't look like the other arrows. 15. Again, I wasn't sure if it was a vacuole or a lysosome, and since it's close to the Golgi, I also would have accepted vesicle. Because in your notes it says, vesicles would be close to the Golgi. 16, ER, endoplasmic reticulum, or rough ER. This one, I didn't even count 13, which is, I think, smooth ER, because I thought the smooth ER in this particular diagram, the smooth ER and the Golgi look pretty much alike. They say that the ER is wrapped around the nucleus, and this piece right here doesn't look like it's wrapped around the nucleus, but it doesn't look like the Golgi either. So I just didn't give you a 13. Okay, that's it for that one. The next one is also an animal cell. And I wanted to point out K. I don't think it's actually on here. No. K, if you look at this, when there's endocytosis and exocytosis, it's the process that the cell brings things in or puts things out. Basically, when a piece of food or something comes up to the cell membrane, the cell membrane wraps around it and lets it in. It can't just burst open and let it in, because all the cytoplasm would run out and the cell would die. So it's kind of got to make a package and wrap around it, seal up before it lets it in. And the opposite is true for exocytosis, going out. But anyway, A, that's a mitochondria. Again, it looks like a maze is inside. We know it's not a chloroplast, which looks similar to that, because this is an animal cell. B is Golgi. And this one, the arrow is not actually touching it. On the test, I tried to get diagrams that the arrow was actually touching what it was pointing to. So hopefully that'll help. C down here is pointing to nothing. It's clearly pointing at nothing. Oh, I gotta move this up. Clearly pointing to nothing. So C is cytoplasm. D, E, and F are all pointing to something in the nucleus, but D looks like it's pointing to the ball in the middle of the nucleus, which would be the nucleolus or nucleolus. E is kind of pointing at the whole thing, and F is right on the boundary of the nucleus, which would be the nuclear membrane. G is over here pointing to the outer boundary of the animal cell, which would be the cell membrane. H and L are kind of pointing to the same thing, and I was afraid you'd get confused. L does say the dots, and H doesn't, but H is before L, so I was afraid you'd mess this up. So I just put an H, and I would have accepted ribosome or rough ER, because it's the ribosomes or the dots that make the ER rough. The ribosomes are stuck to the ER. And I is a pretty good drawing of centrioles. They have to do with mitosis and cell division, which we'll get into later. And then J is smooth ER. Notice it's attached to the rough ER, but there's no ribosome stuck to it. Okay, down at the bottom, this is a plant cell. It's a plant cell. You can tell because the flattish sides, and it's got a cell wall. Number one is cell wall. It's that rigid outer covering. If it wasn't for a cell wall, the plant couldn't stand up. It'd be like you without a skeleton. Yeah, you'd lay in a puddle. All right, number two is they're very clearly pointing to the inner edge, which is where you'd find the cell membrane, because on a plant cell, the cell wall is on the outside, and there is a cell membrane inside that. It's kind of like an egg. If you've ever cracked an egg and noticed there's a membrane on the inside of the shell, it's very much like that. 3 is the vacuole. You're not going to get the vacuole confused in a plant cell, because the vacuole is huge in a plant cell. Probably because plant cells can't store anything in fat. So they have to store everything inside each cell. 4 is the nucleus. It's kind of pointing to the whole thing. If it was pointing at chromatin, it would probably draw in chromatin like these scribbles that I added in. The nucleolus is the ball inside the nucleus. It makes ribosomes. And then 6 is pointing to the outer edge of the nucleus, which would be the nuclear membrane. Now, we're in a plant cell. So again, telling the difference between a mitochondria and a chloroplast, you're going to have to look. Sometimes most of the time, the chloroplast is drawn larger, but not in this case. But what is always the case is the chloroplast looks like it's got stacks of coins inside, and the mitochondria looks like a maze inside. They're both little round, and they cut them open so you can see the inside. Sometimes in a diagram there'll be one cut open and one not cut open, but they'll make them look different enough that you can tell by their shape. But anyway, so 7's a chloroplast. That turns sunlight into energy. Remember, you don't have those because your body can't turn sunlight into energy. So an animal cell doesn't have chloroplasts. You do have mitochondria. Mitochondria, they make food into energy, and like your muscle cells would have a lot more mitochondria than, say, your skin cells, because your muscles need a lot more energy than your skin does. Cytoplasm is number 9. Number 9 is cytoplasm. It seems to be pointing at nothing. 10 I put as a lysosome because we're not going to confuse it with the vacuole in a plant cell. Vacuole's great big. 11 is rough ER. Notice it's wrapped around the nucleus, and it's got ribosomes stuck to it. And 12 is smooth ER. Same thing, only it doesn't have ribosome stuck to it. Kind of skipping down to 14. I didn't make 14. 14 is on, well, let me skip. Let me do 13. 13, this blob of ribosomes here, if you're like, gosh, is that ribosomes or is that lysosome? Notice they look just like what's stuck to the ER. That's your clue. 14 is a Golgi apparatus. I was a little concerned because the notes say that the ER is wrapped around the nucleus. And while this is faced the other direction and doesn't look like it's wrapped around the nucleus, it's pretty close to the nucleus. But this would be the Golgi body. You can notice it has the vesicles coming off of it. Okay, I'm going to try to get the last one and the new stuff on the same screen here. Got to make sure I'm getting it on the camera too for the people watching from home. Okay, and again, use your notes to study for the test. Which part controls the cell? The nucleus? Yep. Which part packages proteins? Is a Golgi apparatus or Golgi body? It packages proteins. Which part has to do with mitosis? Centrioles. I'm going to uncover the rest of these. Which part has ribosomes stuck to it? The ER, because I'm going to turn off my video. I'm not going to be able to transfer it if it gets any longer than this.